I'm fairly active, but noticed I was moving a lot less over the winter and had a little bit of winter fluff that I wanted to get rid of. So just as much for the health benefits, I wondered what would happen if I walked 10,000 steps a day, about 5 miles a day for the entire month of February. Well, in this video, I'm going to share the results of what happened, what I learned along the way, and also give you some really proper tips, some decent tips if you want to do this as well. And I'll also show you why this may actually make your house tidier too. Let's get cracking. I have filmed some B-roll of me walking, but I mean, in short, I just walked. And when YouTubers film videos of themselves walking, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but you've got to set up the camera. You've then got to walk away from the camera out of shot, walk across the camera to show that you're walking, pretending the camera isn't there, whilst also worrying that someone's going to steal the camera. And then you need to run back and be relieved that nobody stole your camera. I'm sorry if that's burst anyone's bubbles, but that's just how it works. As I mentioned, 10,000 steps is around 5 miles. I have a home gym, so I took a break from my bike, which I did miss, and I concentrated on using the treadmill. Now, I did about 4 30-minute runs a week, and that really helped in getting my steps up. And at my running pace, 2,000 steps takes about 10 minutes. And when I say 10 minutes, I mean 15. I've invented, like, between a shuffle and a jog, I call it shogging. It's a bit like a parent on the school run and the kids are late for school. So that's my running pace. I would generally walk outside. However, if the weather was bad or I found myself short on steps towards the end of the day, I would just put an iPad on my treadmill and I would just finish off my steps at home in the gym. If you haven't got a treadmill, you can just wander around your house. I mean, it's not the best solution, but if you find yourself in a pinch, that's always a way to get your steps in. I'll show my daily steps on screen now. Feel free to freeze it if you want to have a really good look. My lowest step day was on February the 3rd, where we were traveling and I only managed 3,200 steps. On the 17th, we went to London, avoided public transport and managed 19,350 steps and walked nearly 9 miles on that day. I knew I'd need to hit 290,000 steps by the end of the month. And if you watch this in the future, it's 2024 and it's a leap year. So there's 29 days in February. By the end of the month though, I'd hit 314,000 steps with an average step count of 10,800 steps a day. So what were the results? Well, according to my Apple Watch, my exercise minutes for the day was up, as you can imagine. My walking pace increased slightly, but I did get a slight uptick in my cardiovascular fitness with my VO2 max. Now, it wasn't much of an uptick, but as a lifelong asthmatic, I mean, even small increments do really make a difference. Data from my Whoop showed me that my HRV was actually up 17% month on month, which really pleased me. And if you don't know what your HRV is, it's your heart rate variability. So you have your, essentially, like in simple terms, your rest and digest system and your fight and flight system, your para and parasympathetic nervous system. Both are trying to influence how many times your heart beats in a minute. So if your heart is beating at 60 beats a minute, there won't be exactly a second between each beat, and that's called your HRV. And the higher your HRV, the better really. My resting heart rate, also a measure of your cardiovascular fitness, dropped by 9% as well. So that was another surprise. I really didn't expect, as an active person anyway, I didn't really expect any changes in those areas. None of my trackers recorded improvement in my sleep though. However, I have had an 8-sleep for the last 6 months. If you don't know what an 8-sleep is, it's essentially a very sophisticated mattress topper which controls your temperature of the mattress throughout the night, and it just keeps you, it works to keep you in optimum sleep zones as the night goes on. So my sleep since getting this 8-sleep has just been superb anyway, so there wasn't really any way for it to go. I do highly recommend 8-sleep, but if you're thinking about your fitness overall, then the cornerstone of that is sleep really. Everything comes off how well you've slept. I'll put a link in the description to an 8-sleep. It's an expensive product, but I do have a stackable discount code that they kindly gave me, meaning that whatever discount is on the 8-sleep website, this will add an even bigger discount for you. Another thing that surprised me was for the first 15 days of walking, because I was walking 5 miles every day, and this isn't something that I would normally do, I did start to get like aches in my feet, my ankles, and my hips. Now, part of this was down to the fact that I got a UTI, which really surprised me. But after the 15 days, everything just seemed to click into place, and it actually became really easy to do. And I built a habit quite quickly where I looked forward to getting my 10,000 steps in. Much as there were plenty of upsides to walking 10,000 steps a day, there were also some downsides which I didn't expect. And I did take a real dip in my ankle and my hip mobility. And you can see here from my pliability score that my hips are down and then my ankles are flashing blue, have become an area for concern. So this lasted for the first 2 or 3 weeks of walking and kind of matches how I felt, I think. But that seems to have leveled off now. I love my NordicTrack bike, so I did miss using that for a whole month. But going forward, I'll just swap out 10 minutes of reasonable effort on the bike for 1,000 steps and just bring it back into my daily routine, because as much as I love walking, I also love biking and I also love rowing. Lastly, and maybe most importantly for a lot of people, it's the time factor. So my walking speed is 3 miles an hour, which means I need to walk for about 1 hour and 40 minutes a day, every day. That's okay for me because my kids are now teenagers and I'm self-employed, which does help. But if you lead a busy life, in addition to that, you have a 9-to-5 job, I'll talk about how you can break it up in a moment to make it more achievable. It can be done, but it might be harder for some people than others. The upside to walking is that it's very accessible for most people. People generally already own shoes, so you haven't got to buy any special equipment. And because it's zone 1 cardio, maybe tipping into zone 2 at some points, it's very achievable to do in the fact that you don't sweat. So if you are going out for a half an hour walk before work, maybe a half an hour walk in your lunch hour, and then a half an hour walk in the evening before you pick the kids up, there's lots of opportunity to get your steps in without becoming a sweaty mess and needing a shower every time you try and go out and walk. When it comes to tips, I've got some good ones for you. And the first one is to get your steps in early. Get into like 6 o'clock in the evening and knowing that you've got to go out in the dark and walk for like an hour and a half is not going to be fun. And I wouldn't really do that unless you had to. If you can get your steps in, I kind of found that if I got 8,000 steps in, so about 4 miles by about 4 p.m, then just by being active around my house, I managed to make up the rest of the steps before I went to bed. My next tip is to go for an average. Don't just kind of restrict yourself to 10,000 steps a day. It's actually much easier if you restrict yourself to an average of 10,000 steps a day. So that means if you have a busy day where you're just not getting the steps in and you're halfway through and you do 3,000 steps, you've not blown your challenge because you might be ahead already, or you can just make those steps up on the rest of the days. Also, you might find that you can easily walk at weekends and that you might do 60-70% of your walking over the weekend if you've not got time to do it in the week. My next tip, and probably the biggest tip for getting steps in around your house, is adopt the philosophy of putting things away and not just down. I'm sure you'll relate to this. In our house, things get put at the bottom of the stairs to go up later. Now there's 4 of us. We each go up the stairs 10 times each. So there's probably 40 opportunities for that thing to go up the stairs. At the end of the day, where is it? Still at the bottom of the stairs. Another thing is, if you bring your shopping in from the car, for instance, and you've got your bags for life, don't just hook them over your door handle to take out back to the car. Next time you go to the car, put your shoes back on, walk them to the car, and then come back, take your shoes off again, and you'll find that your house will be tidier, and you'll probably increase the steps around your house by at least 50%. If you have a treadmill at home, then my next tip is to put an iPad holder on it and just jump on 3 miles an hour or whatever your walking pace is. Put your favorite shows on YouTube or Netflix, whatever, and you will easily breeze through 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes of just walking on that treadmill whilst watching your favorite program and getting like the vast majority of your steps in at the same time. The next tip is to start gradually. So if you're currently walking 2,000 steps a day, it might be a big ask for you then to go straight to 10,000 steps. Rather than this being something you do for a month, it might be something you choose to do for 6 months. So you go from 2,000 steps to 4,000 steps in month 1, 6,000 steps in month 2, and you gradually increase the number of steps over time. At the same time, you'll be building a habit. So by the time you finish your challenge, you'll be like I am now, where it's going to be very difficult for me to actually stop doing this because I've become slightly addicted to it. My next tip is to walk with a friend. My weekend walks were with my wife quite often, and they're almost like mini dates. You get a chance to spend time together without the family, if you've got a family, have a catch up, and then also get your steps in as well. And you can also like tick it off as spending time together. I mean, I didn't tell you that. In conclusion, I'm really pleased I did this, and one of the things that I was expecting to have was just physical benefits. What I hadn't anticipated were the mental benefits. Now, I obviously live at home. Well, I'm in my house now. I work at home and I also work out at home. So there are some days, if I'm not careful, where I actually don't leave the house. In addition to that, I'm much less sociable than people think I am. So I really benefited from getting out in the fresh air and also like micro human interactions. I live in a town where about half the people say hello when you walk past them in the street. So if you live in the country, you're probably thinking only half. But if you live in the city, you're probably thinking, how do I cope with half the people saying hello to me? I once got on a packed London tube train, forgot where I was momentarily, walked on, said, morning, and suddenly I had a lot more space than everyone else in that carriage. Anyway, these micro interactions are really good for your soul and not to be underestimated. And finally, the most important thing to remember is to find a walking routine that fits to your lifestyle and is achievable by you. Walking has great health benefits, and unless you get run over, it's fairly low impact as well on your body. Well, I hope you found this video useful, and until next time, see you soon.